What's happening, guys? This is Mike's Little Dragon Channel, and tonight I thought we would take a look at a very special issue, one of the standout issues um, from not just Alan Moore and not just a standout Swamp Thing issue, but also a standout one shot story in the history of comics. This was a story here that not only was it, not only is it critically acclaimed from Alan Moore, and not only is it a major part of Swamp Thing's story and his legacy or whatever, but it really was a game changer in comic books, and we'll get to that as we read this story. Um, so you've got here Saga of Swamp Thing, issue number 21. Now this story is what is referred to as the anatomy lesson. Alan Moore was on this book at the time, and I believe this is his first really big American book. I feel like this is, I could be wrong about that, but I think this is the first book that he worked on when he came to DC. Um, he was one of the first really big guys to come over in what they call the European invasion, where they had all those really great writers come over here and was doing a lot of great work. And Alan Moore was one of those first guys. So actually, this would not have been, obviously he would have done Watchmen before he did this, so that's not right. But in any case, Swamp Thing was one of his first ongoing books, I guess you would say. And it really, if you ever get a chance to read the Alan Moore Swamp Thing run, they have it collected in hardcovers, and I'm not sure what the aftermarket price is, but it's a really great collection. Alan Moore, up till now, the Swamp Thing character had basically just been scientist Alec Holland caught in a chemical explosion in the swamp, and he is now this big plant monster, essentially. But as we'll see here in this issue, Alan Moore came on and he turned all of that on its head. So we open up right here and we have a little bit of narration. It's raining in Washington tonight, plump, warm, summer rain that covers the sidewalks with leopard spots. Downtown, elderly ladies carry their house plants out to set them on the fire escapes as if they were infirm relatives or boy kings. I like that. My name is Jason Woodrow, Dr. Jason Woodrow. I'm here in my apartment. I'm watching the rain, and I'm thinking about the old man. He'll be pounding on the glass right about now, or maybe not now, maybe in a while, but he'll be pounding, and there will be blood. I like to imagine so. Yes, I'd rather think there will be blood. Lots of blood. Blood in extraordinary quantities. So just this first page here, if you're not familiar with Alan Moore, this is a very Alan Moore page. He is very, I like to say, flowery with his writing, but I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. His writing is very descriptive, and it's almost like poetry, you know. The way that he crafts sentences and describes situations, and the way he's just descriptive in his narrative, it just is very unique to him. He has a certain amount of, I don't want to say class, because class isn't really the word that I'm looking for, but he has a certain style about it. You know, it's very descriptive, and he uses, you know, the way he describes things, like the like right here, warm summer rain that covers the sidewalks with leopard spots. And you can kind of visualize that in your mind of just how the puddles are on a sidewalk, and they're just, you know, like splotches all over the place, and it looks how the leopard, the spots on a leopard has its pattern. But we'll get to the story right here, and basically it opens up. Um, so basically, the gist of Swamp Thing up to this point was this guy here, the evil old man. His name, I believe it's Anton Arkin, Anton Arcane, or something like that. Anyway, he was a guy. Well, I'll go ahead and read it right here, and that way you can get the real story. This was once a human being. His name was Alec Holland. He was a doctor like yourself. He was doing government work, developing something called a biorestorative formula, which was intended to promote crop growth. The experiment was sabotaged. There was an explosion. Holland and his chemical soup went into the swamp where the project was located, and this is what came out. His wife and co-worker, you know, those people, liberal, equal relationships, caring and sharing. His wife was shot and killed shortly after Holland vanished in the explosion. She's the reason you're here, Woodrow. You see, we got interest in this formula that Holland had been working on. We had her exhumed. It made sense, after all. Apart from her husband, she was the only human who had been exposed to the formula. She'd been working with the stuff for months. We figured it may have permeated her cellular structure just through repeated contact. So we dug her up, and we had some people poke around a little. You know what we found? Nothing. So this guy here, he tracked Swamp Thing down. He has him captured. He thinks he can get this formula that turned Alec Holland into Swamp Thing, and he thinks he can use it. But he says that they didn't find that the formula accomplished anything. So that's why they have Alec Holland here. So now he brings Jason Woodrow in, and he's going to have him basically do an autopsy on the corpse to see what they can find. And as you see right here, the name of this issue is called The Anatomy Lesson. And so from here on, the rest of the story, Jason Woodrow is basically dissecting the Swamp Thing corpse. And he does all these tests. He cuts it open and he analyzes it. And like, here's one instance. What are they? His lungs or something? No, they look like lungs, but human lungs have tiny capillary tubes that let oxygen pass through into the blood. That's what lungs are for. These are vegetable fibers. Vegetable fibers are too coarse to allow molecules or oxygen through in that way. These things suck and blow, but they don't do anything else. They don't work. They're not lungs. So I wonder what they are. So he makes these discoveries. He finds a heart that doesn't do anything. He finds kidneys that don't do anything. And so basically throughout all this issue, that's all this is. It's just Dr. Jason Woodrow, who's also a minor supervillain named the Floronic Man, who can control plants. Basically, this whole issue is just him dissecting and experimenting on the corpse of Swamp Thing. So then he has this epiphany right here. Planarian worms. They're the key to everything. Oh my god, that's so obvious. You see, a while ago, some people did an experiment. They taught a planarian worm to run a simple maze. They educated it, then they chopped it up and fed its remains to a bunch of other worms that couldn't run the maze. Except that after digesting the educated comrade, the worms could run the maze perfect. Don't you see, General? The implication is that consciousness and intelligence can be passed on to foodstuff. And the general is just like, look, just tell me what's going on here. I don't understand what you're getting at. And Jason Woodrose said, well, let's get back to Jason. Let's get back to Alec Holland. And he goes, they have this flashback to the night of the explosion. Alec Holland is blown up. He's thrown into the swamp. And Jason Woodrose says, Alec Holland is already dead. His body goes to the swamp along with the formula that it is saturated with, and once there, it decomposes. A patch of swampland like that would be teeming with microorganisms. It wouldn't take long, General. But what about the plants in the swamp? The plants that have been altered by the biorestorative formula. The plants whose hungry root systems are busily ingesting the mortal remains of Alec Holland. Those plants eat him. They eat him as if he were a planarian worm, or a cannibal wise man, or a genius. They eat him, and they become infected by a powerful consciousness that does not realize it is no longer alive. Imagine that cloudy, confused intelligence, possibly with only the vaguest notion of self, trying to make sense of this new environment, gradually shaping the plant cells that it now inhabits into a shape that it's most comfortable with. It remembers having bones, so it builds itself a skeleton. It remembers having muscles and constructs muscles from plant fiber. It remembers having lungs and a heart and a brain, and it does its best to duplicate them. You see, we were wrong, General. We thought that the Swamp Thing was Alec Holland somehow transformed into a plant. It wasn't. It was a plant that thought it was Alec Holland. A plant that was trying its best to be Alec Holland. So, that right there is the big revelation of this issue. Throughout the whole time that we've known Swamp Thing in the DC Universe, he has been thought to be a guy who was caught in an explosion and it turned him into Swamp Thing. Well, in reality, he died in that explosion, and the plants and everything that was in that swamp constructed a body that imprinted upon his brain patterns. So, like he says, you have a plant that thinks it is a person. So all of these quests and all of these missions and these hopes and these previous adventures that Swamp Thing had in his whole, dreams of turning himself back to being human were just non-existent. None of that stuff was ever possible. And so you had this, for the lack of a better term, this zombie Alec Holland, or this zombie plant that thinks is a person. That's been the only thing that it's had to look forward to for its entire existence. And so you see throughout these last couple of pages here, you see the Swamp Thing, its plant self, emerging from the frozen corpse of its previous that got captured, and it's a plant, so it just ultimately grows back, and you see it confront this guy here, this general, and he says, "You are you still intelligent? Can you understand what I'm saying? The file on you, look, I don't know if you read that file." And Swamp Thing utters, "Yes, I have read the file." And this guy, he says, "Do you like it?" And you can just see Swamp Thing's eyes right here. Just see the shock and the rage at the realization that he's just been living a lie. He's just been living, essentially someone else's life, that he's not who he thought he was, and everything he's done has just been for nothing, and he's not even a real person. He's just basically, like you said, like a zombie plant with brain patterns from somebody else, and you see he does not handle it very well. And then we have some really more great narration here from Woodrow. And this is another great example of Alan Moore's skill with a pencil, his writing, or with a pen, I should say. I'm thinking about the old man. I'm thinking about the cracking of his joints as he runs. I'm thinking of the terror in his ancient, atrophied heart. This is his building, you see. This is the place where he was safe. Now the blind glass and the dispassionate metal mocks him with his own reflection, frightened and small and scurrying, like a beetle in a box, like a worm in a maze. Of course, there's never been any real evidence of the Swamp Thing intentionally hurting or killing anyone. The old man wouldn't be in any real danger at all, as long as the creature hasn't read my notes. But if he has read my notes, you see, throughout his miserable existence, the only thing that could have kept him sane was the hope that he might one day regain his humanity. The knowledge that under all that slime he was still Alec Holland. But if he read my notes, he'll know that just isn't true. He isn't Alec Holland. He never will be Alec Holland. He never was. He's just a ghost dressed in weeds. I wonder how he'll take it, and I wonder how the old man will take it when the doors don't open. And so we have this last page here. We see Swamp Thing has caught the old man, and he holds him to his body, essentially suffocating him. Holds him there until he dies. The old man dies. And then the story ends. And what then? Where would the creature go? I have to know. I have to follow him. There's so much to learn, so much to know. Where would I go if I were the Swamp Thing? I'd go to Louisiana, back to the mud and the steam and the flies. Back to the bayou. Back home. And so that is, whenever you hear people talk about greatest one-shot stories ever, they frequently mention The Anatomy Lesson here by Alan Moore. And this is a prime example of what I like to refer to as everything you know is wrong. That is a type of storytelling technique where everything that you thought you knew about this character, or about something that's previously established, some sort of lore or some sort of fact, or what have you, a new creative team comes on, and they reveal that all that has just been misinformation, or it's just been a giant lie, or it's just some sort of huge retcon, as they would say. I like to call it everything you know is wrong. That's the style of storytelling I like to refer to it as. You had previously all these issues of Swamp Thing by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. They were the creators of Swamp Thing, and they told a whole bunch of stories about him. And Swamp Thing was used in various other parts of the DC universe, and there was never any, hint or any inkling or anything that he was actually just a plant with a person's memories. In fact, they had a couple of stories. I think it was in DC's Brave and the Bold team-up issues, where he reverted back to Alec Holland. But Alan Moore came on to Swamp Thing, and he wanted to clear the deck, so to speak. He wanted to basically get rid of all the previous cast, kind of wrap up all their stories, and he wanted to start from scratch. And the best way he could do that is by introducing this concept of the fact that this was not a man underneath there. It was a plant that thought it was a man, which was very, now it might seem kind of, you might hear that type of storytelling and you might think it trite here in 2025. But when this story first came out, there was not, it hadn't been beaten to death like like it has now. So I really want to recommend Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing. It's in various collections out there. So if you come across it, pick it up. It's really great stuff. He set the foundation for a lot of things that are still currently being used in the DC universe. Specifically the Parliament of the Trees. Swamp Thing being like a kind of a champion of the green, so to speak. So all that started right here. So Alan Moore Swamp Thing, highly recommend it. Anatomy lesson, one of the great one-shot stories of all time for a reason, because it was a groundbreaker. So until next time, I will talk to you guys later. Have a good night, and bye bye.